This program is presented by
SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.
Co-presented by Canrib Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Vita Herbs Philippines Green Coffee, masarap, mabango, at healthy pa. Kubert Industries Incorporated Trading and Services, the cooling expert. In participation with Rain or Shine Elastomeric Waterproofing Paint, color for protection for your home. Matimco. Matimco is wood. Wood is Matimco. R Square Variables Incorporated, your trusted UPS supplier and UPS maintenance provider in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. CompuZell Computer Services, ID card and lanyard manufacturer. DN Steel. EMAC UPVC Roof Corporation.
The Bulacan Bulk Water Project is a treatment facility that will provide bulk water to the 24 municipalities of Bulacan to meet the increasing water demand of its residents. Through concessionaire, SMC Infrastructure also initiated the significant improvements of the Manila North Harbor Port, the country's busiest port.
Magandang umaga, Filipinas. Good morning from Canada. I'm Thomas I. Likeness, reporting from our Eagle News studio in the Western Canadian province of Alberta. My city is Edmonton. We're bringing you news from across the country. Monday morning, we start another week. We begin something new today. The program has been expanded to 30 minutes, and hey, the boss hired some help. I'll be joined by correspondents from across Canada who will bring you news from their regions firsthand. So let's get that second cup going now. Mine is black. Yeah, I know yours is 3-in-1. So sit back and relax for a moment. Before I get going here, I want to say a special good morning to my mother-in-law, my wife's nanay, Lourdes Saul. She lives in Santo Tomas, just outside of San Jose City in Nueva Ecija. Good morning, nanay. Magandang umaga. You know, when all of this is over, Shello and I hope we can hop on a plane and come over for a visit. Let's take a look at the weather across Canada now. Our street scene today comes from Toronto. And we thank Sherry Marcelino. She shot that street scene today. The Toronto Park, what a great day for a walk, but I understand because of social distancing, that's why there's not a lot of people out there. Let's take a quick look at the weather map, though. Mostly sunny across the country. In British Columbia, Vancouver reporting 12 degrees. In Alberta, temperatures were in the low to mid-teens. 15 degrees here in Edmonton, but the wind was very, very strong. Over in Saskatchewan, sunshine, 9 degrees in Saskatoon, got up to 14 in Regina. The clouds rolled in to Manitoba, where in Winnipeg it is overcast. They got to a high of 15 degrees today. Toronto, I understand there was light rain earlier today and 9 degrees. 13 in the nation's capital with just a few clouds. Montreal had sunshine and 15. We go over to the Atlantic provinces where there were mostly sunny skies. Temperatures, though, kind of varied anywhere from 9 degrees to 15 degrees. That's a look at the weather map for today. Now, some of the stories we're following this morning. Another Canadian province starts to ease restrictions. Prime Minister Trudeau announces help for the fish and seafood sector. Have you heard about immunity passports? Well, stick around and we'll tell you about them. And what do you think about resuming professional sports? Oh, no, we can't go to the game, but having them played in arenas without any fans. We'll tell you about that as well. From our correspondents, we go to Toronto, where Marco Rizzaruto will join us in a few minutes. He'll have an update from Ontario. We'll also have 2 reports from British Columbia. Kathleen Cruz will update the situation in BC, tell us about the homeless problem there. Vanessa De La Cruz tells us about research Canada is doing into the COVID-19 pandemic. And we'll have a video postcard for you at the end and just whatever else I can shoehorn in here this morning. Now, the eastern Canadian province of New Brunswick is joining Saskatchewan in easing restrictions imposed because of the pandemic. Premier Blaine Higgs announced a 4-phase plan The first phase is now in effect.
Effective immediately, households may now choose to spend time with one another, with one other household, assuming, of course, both households agree. The selection is not interchangeable. With proper physical distancing, people can now enjoy outdoor spaces, including parks and beaches. Co-workers or neighbors can carpool as long as guidelines from public health are maintained, which means there should only be 2 people in the vehicle, with the passenger in the back seat. Post-secondary students requiring access to campus can fulfill course requirements if they are able to do so in a safe manner. As an alternative to online worship, religious organizations can hold outdoor services if parishioners can stay in their vehicles at all times and the vehicles are spaced 2 meters apart.
Now, Higgs says there is no target dates for the other 3 phases of the relaunch.
This is not about timelines, it's about a process. I believe when this process is done, New Brunswick will indeed be stronger and more resilient than it ever has been. We aren't yet ready to open large sectors immediately. Large gatherings such as festivals and concerts will not be allowed until after December 31st, though this is a subject that will be reviewed depending on circumstances.
Higgs says New Brunswick has the lowest per capita rate of COVID-19. These numbers are from Friday. The province reported only 118 confirmed cases, and that's since the beginning of the outbreak. The number of active cases is only 11. 107 people have recovered. There are 4 patients in hospital and just 1 in intensive care. Now, on the weekend, Prime Minister Trudeau announced $62 million worth of help for fish and seafood processors in our country.
As we fight COVID-19, people who work in fish and seafood processing plants across the country are playing a crucial role when it comes to getting food to our tables. This funding will help ensure that they can safely continue their important work. We're giving more money to processors so that they can purchase personal protective equipment for workers, adapt to health protocols, and support other social distancing measures. For example, fish processing plants could buy new equipment like freezers or storage space so that their product, food for Canadians, can stay good while they respond to a changing market. With this announcement, we're giving fish and seafood processors more resources to adapt to the many challenges brought on by the pandemic, and above all, keep workers safe.
Now, this sector also relies on migrant agricultural workers, temporary foreign workers, and because of the pandemic, they've had difficulty getting enough help. Coupled with the changes because of social distancing, where you can't have workers as close together, this truly has been challenging for this sector. Well, have you ever heard of an immunity passport? It's an idea being kicked around by several governments, mostly in Europe. Basically, it's documentation that states a person has immunity to COVID-19. It's based on the idea that if you have COVID antibodies in your bloodstream, you won't come down with the infection, therefore you're safe. But the World Health Organization says, no, that's not true, because people who have recovered ended up getting reinfected. And the WHO says immunity passports may in fact promote the spread of coronavirus. Now, these documents aren't getting much attention here. Prime Minister Trudeau says it is just way too soon to be talking about them.
It is very clear that the science is not decided on whether or not having had COVID once prevents you from getting it again. We know it is something that we need to get clearer answers to, and until we have those clear answers, we need to assume and err on the side of more caution.
Trudeau says none of his discussions with the provincial premiers have included the idea of issuing immunity passports as part of the reopening process. Well, the question of professional sports has come up again. Can they be safely played in arenas with no fans? Well, from a business point of view, I guess it makes sense. It certainly would generate revenue from the television contracts. And, of course, it would satisfy the cravings of fans who've had to survive on a skimpy diet of reruns. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health does not rule out that possibility, but Dr. Dina Hinshaw is still cautious.
Certainly, as we look at our relaunch planning and the kinds of restrictions that we may be able to ease up on in the coming months, we would look at suggestions like this to determine if they fit within that relaunch plan. So at this time, it's a little early to say whether or not that will happen. But again, I think the important piece would be to assess what the risks might be and whether or not that can fit within the relaunch framework and what kinds of activities are allowed as we consider how and when we might slowly open up.
And what about amateur sports? Will kids and even adults have a chance to play in summer leagues this year, Dr. Hinshaw?
So we are looking at outdoor recreation as a part of the question of the relaunch and the staging of the relaunch. So I would say to those associations that certainly the opportunity to have many spectators gathering together is unlikely to happen, but whether or not those sports can go ahead, again, will be part of the discussions that we're having with respect to staging of relaunch, when that might happen, and what kinds of activities will be permitted. And I know that people want to plan, and I know that the more advance notice they have, the easier it is to make those plans. But I would just ask people to be patient as we work through these relaunch discussions, and we will be coming forward with more information.
So again, I guess we'll just wait and see. Coming up, we'll hear firsthand from Eagle News correspondent Marco Zerudo about the situation in Ontario. This is Eagle News Mornings from Canada.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Watching Eagle News Mornings from Canada, I'm Thomas I. Like News. Ontario is one of the provinces most hardest hit by the pandemic. It has the second highest number of cases, more than 14,000. 835 people have died from the infection. About 70% of those deaths are linked to nursing homes, long-term care facilities. Standing by, Eagle News correspondent Mark Zerudo. Marco, the premier of your province has a personal stake in this. His 95-year-old mother-in-law is in a nursing home. She's tested positive for coronavirus, and Doug Ford has announced major support for frontliners in this battle. Marco, what is this all about?
That's right, Tom. The Ontario government has recently announced new measures when it comes to helping the frontline workers, the heroes of those fighting the current pandemic of COVID-19. They recently announced that all frontline workers will be receiving an additional $4 an hour on top of their existing wage, as well as $250 at the end of every month, which will last for about 4 months, this measure. Now, on average, for those working full-time, that comes up to about $3,500, which will be a big help to the frontline workers. And those who will be eligible are those working in long-term care homes, retirement homes, emergency shelters, supportive housing, social services, correctional institutions, as well as youth justice facilities, hospital staff, and those who are providing cleaning and meal preparations for the frontliners.
Marco, how long is this support going to go on? Is it just because we're told this pandemic, this lockdown could last well into the fall?
That's right. Currently, the measurement is only for the next 4 months. But speaking to those who are affected by this new measure, their hope is that it will not only be 4 months, but it will go beyond that, not only lasting till the end of whenever this pandemic finishes, but it will be permanent, so that they feel that they are recognized for the work that they do, being a frontline worker inside the hospital and other health settings.
I'm glad you brought that up, because the pandemic has kind of really highlighted a problem that's been around for years. I mean, there's been the staff shortages, there's been the underpayment of workers. This certainly, Marco, isn't anything new.
No, that's right. One of the major things that are talked about whenever there's an election here in this province is unions talking about making sure essential workers, frontline workers, hospital staff are paid properly, recognizing the work that they do, helping not only the citizens of Ontario, but it really does affect the economy of Ontario. So this has been a long time ongoing issue that I guess a silver lining to what's happening now is there's a light has been shown on this, and hopefully proper action will finally be taken.
Before I let you go, Marco, this really has been very, very personal for Premier Doug Ford.
That's right. When he talks about the long-term care facilities recently in a press conference, he started getting emotional because it affects him, especially having his mother-in-law in a long-term care home, and now also confirming she also has COVID-19. So he has a personal stake in this, and we can see and hear from the way he speaks to Ontarians, he will not rest until this thing is over, and we have figured out exactly what we need to do to win this fight for COVID-19.
Thank you very much, Marco. We truly do live in interesting times. That was Marco Zerudo in Toronto. Because we now go to the west coast of Canada, where Eagle News correspondent Kathleen Cruz explains how the provincial government is trying to control outbreaks in the homeless community. Kathleen, I understand the government's putting people up with no place to stay in hotels. But before we get into that, update us on the numbers situation in your province.
Yes, so there are now more than 1,900 confirmed cases of COVID-19 here in the province of British Columbia, and tragically with 100 deaths in total, which majority are from those in the long-term care facilities. The sudden spike in numbers over the few days here in BC were from community outbreaks, including the correctional facility in Mission, BC, and poultry facilities in Vancouver. From the latest update of Dr. Bonnie Henry, BC's provincial health officer ensured British Columbians that the health sector is also looking out for communities who cannot self-isolate and no access to proper housing. And this is what Dr. Bonnie had to say.
As we continue to move forward in our COVID-19 response, it's important that we don't leave anyone behind, particularly people who I know are dealing with many different crises, including people who use drugs, people who are underhoused and homeless. Everyone in BC deserves to feel safe, protected, and supported through these crises. Safe physical distancing and self-isolation, if you're ill, can be really difficult when your housing is precarious. As we continue to move forward in our COVID-19 response, it's important that we don't leave anyone behind.
The announcement also tackled issues that the province is facing, not only the current pandemic, but also the mental health and addiction crisis.
Today, the province announced over 1,000 hotel rooms to provide safe housing for people living in encampments in Victoria and Vancouver, and a plan, and importantly, a plan to support people in housing, but also to ensure that they have the mental health, the physical health, and the social supports that they need.
The additional support to relocate vulnerable people out of camps and tents to hotel rooms will help these individuals to adhere physical distancing, self-isolate when ill, and most of all, control additional community outbreaks. But these people are also dealing with other issues like addiction and mental health. Since the COVID-19 outbreak, the province had reduced their services to support these individuals because healthcare workers are concerned about their safety, such as inability of these individuals to self-isolate and access to clean space. This announced strategy will address stigma and continued access for care of these individuals battling substance abuse and mental health issues. In Vancouver, Kathleen Cruz, Eagle News, will live in interesting times.
Kathleen, I'm curious as to what prompted the provincial government to adopt this strategy.
Yes, Sam. So this came about from some advocates hoping that the government will place a strategic plan focusing to these individuals because they felt abandoned and unsafe. And there are about currently hundreds of people sleeping in tents and camps in Vancouver and in Victoria.
Well, hopefully this will work out for them. Now, because there's no effective treatment for coronavirus, our best hope to tame this bug is with a vaccine. Eagle News correspondent Vanessa De La Cruz is in Vancouver. She tells us about the Canadian government's $1.1 billion fund to support research on vaccines and other treatments.
We have seen a global collaboration of research and technology in regards to the fight of COVID-19. As announced, Canada is contributing to this research as the federal government announced a $1.1 billion support for a national medical and research strategy that will focus on research, vaccines, and other treatments. The investment in new medical countermeasures to understand COVID-19 better and the development of infrastructure needed to fight the virus are the plans of the GOCs. The Prime Minister said the government will set up the COVID-19 Immunity Task Force to track and understand immunity to COVID-19. The funding will also provide research to better understand the mental health challenges in relation to dealing with COVID-19 and what measures can help these challenges.
Vanessa, we heard earlier from Kathleen about the homeless situation in Vancouver. I'm curious as to, you're over in Victoria in the capital. What's it like over there?
So I've seen in Victoria, in Pandora Avenue, that's where mainly the homeless tents are. They have put up fences and there's a more of a police presence there. So I think the initiative has started to come about.
Before we wrap up today, I want to tell you about some of the great programming that EBC produces. Now in this shot here, just coming up, we got the control room there. In this shot here, we see the Alumba family in Edmonton watching Guerrero Dos. Just a great movie. If you haven't seen it, be sure to get it up on YouTube. And I've got something else for you now. Do you like music? Do you want to hear new artists? Well, check out the Vocal Chamber. My EBC colleague, Den, well, that's kind of her stage name for the program. Should I? Nah, I won't tell you her real name. She's one of our co-hosts in Seattle. She's one of the hosts. She and little Jassy and Naima Sahar, they've put together just a great program. It's on the EBC Records YouTube channel, also on the Facebook page for EBC Records, the Vocal Chamber. Don't miss it. Now, before we say goodbye, we've got this video postcard from Shanella and Sean Santos. Here they are greeting the frontliners who keep us safe, especially their aunt, Dr. Eileen Santos.
Around the world, thank you very much. To Teacher Dr. Eileen Santos, you're our hero. Keep safe always. We love you. Bye. Bye. We love you. Bye.
Until tomorrow, on behalf of our Canadian news team, I wish you all good health. Take care of others. Take care of yourselves. Stay home, stay safe, and stay tuned to Eagle News for accurate and balanced coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic. And don't forget about all the other great Eagle programming that we've got for you to help you pass a little bit of the time if you're like me and kind of confined to home for a few days. In Edmonton, Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by a new coronavirus introduced to humans for the first time. It is spread from person to person, mainly through the droplets produced when an infected person speaks, coughs, or sneezes. These droplets can land in the mouths or noses of people who are nearby. These droplets are too heavy to travel far in the air. They only travel approximately 1 meter and quickly settle on surfaces. This is the reason person-to-person spread is happening mainly between close contacts. The exact time that the virus can survive on surfaces is not yet known. So it is wise to clean